So thanks for joining us on this episode of the By Many or By Few podcast. 1 Samuel 14:6 says, "There is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few." And as you know, this podcast is always trying to highlight the work of the few, those individuals who step up and into a sometimes unpredictable and often challenging path to stand up for what is right. And so my hope is that each of us, each listener, and myself as well, will be encouraged by what God is willing to do by and through each individual. And you can subscribe to the channel below if you're interested in keeping up with state and local politics here in North Carolina, as well as in South Carolina. But today, I'm so excited for our guest, Mary Barnett. And Mary's running for Charlotte City Council, District 2. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It was a great pleasure to be here with you, Michael.
So, Mary, you already had a big victory here last week. Tell me about that.
The big victory was I was added to the ballot to run against my Democratic opponent. I did not have anyone that I was running against, which was a victory in itself. But now I'm on the ballot to run against a 20-year incumbent for the District 2 in Charlotte. That area is, if you were to look at Charlotte going north to south down 77, if you looked at it as a clock, I'm at about the 11 o'clock area, Beatty's Ford, all the way out to Mountain Island Lake. That area over there, Beatty's Ford Court, a little bit of Sugar Creek and Harris Boulevard.
Okay, so quite a large area there, and so you're now on the ballot for the election, which is July 26th,
Yes.
correct? And just for the background of our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about, what is the Charlotte City Council? What does it do? Who's it comprised of?
The City Council is comprised of 11 members, 4 at large, and 7 district seats. The City Council operates kind of like as a board of directors. The city manager and all of his employees over the water and the transportation departments, they basically run the city, but the City Council oversees what is going on and votes on the specific details that they come up with. Sometimes there's like boards on corporations, and they don't have a whole lot of say in what's going on in the nitty-gritty, but the City Council actually does. So that matters who is on the City Council to decide on the nitty-gritty. Like right now, we're deciding on the UDO, Unified Unified Deal. I can't think of it right now. That is the details of the 2040 plan, which 2040 plan was hastily passed through, created by the city manager. It seems like they've got to have a ton of liberals in there. How do we get rid of them? But if we can keep them from creating more and more and more liberal social ideas by stopping them, by the City Council stopping them with conservatives on it, we can keep the city from turning more and more blue and socialist and not quite as a representative of the entire city, just special interests, leaving the people in my district behind because of the gentrification and the unaffordable housing. Charlotte's growing and we can't help that. That's a good thing. But it's a very difficult balance to keep property rights of a person that is the ability to sell their property, and you can't say I can't sell that property to a corporate person to rent it or not. I mean, it's a very difficult balance right now, and if we can get conservatives on there to come up with creative solutions to this instead of just rubber stamping it through. They say they're trying to protect the affordable housing and stuff, but they are not paying attention to how bad the 2040 plan is and how it will affect the marginalized communities worse than any of us.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that, because last week was the first that I had heard about this 2040 plan. And yet it seems like it's one of those things that everybody in Charlotte should know about because it's going to affect all of us. So what is the 2040 plan?
Um, it's a restructuring of the city planning as to what you can build where. And you may remember probably a year or so ago, I think it was Obama was talking about getting rid of single family housing, this new zoning where it would eliminate city single family housing. And that way it would eliminate a lot of freedom in building. And you would have more duplexes and more things like that. And Trump was really on the, when he was campaigning, he was really talking about, we've got to stop this zoning thing that they're coming up with. And they were passing it everywhere. And Charlotte came up with it and passed it hastily. I mean, they didn't even have a chance to look at it, just like everything else that's passed up in Washington. And because right now the city council is made up of 9 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So there's no way that the Republicans could have stopped it. Now, right now, the 2 Republicans, Tark and Ed Driggs, are trying to hold it at bay through the unified, get the name of that, UDO. That is the part of the bill. You got the main plan passed, but the UDO decides where a tree is, how tall a building is, where the sidewalk has to be. And if we can go in there and tweak that to protect the problems with this thing, we could probably, make it try to make it not as harmful to the marginalized communities. And the only person that is really in there working on that UDO is Ed Driggs. And it's 900 pages long. And he's trying to go in there and go, wait, this isn't right. What about this? What about this? None of the other Democrats are showing up to help. Now, today they did have a meeting about it in the city council. I haven't had time to watch it, but Tark tweeted out today that he was able to get them to move the passage of the UDO past the election, which could possibly give us a little bit more control of it if we all get in.
So I had heard that the 2040 plan was in part about doing away with single family housing, which to me sounds crazy, but that is in fact what it does. It actually makes it illegal.
There's no more zoning for that. There's no zoning for that. There's no such thing anymore.
And so as of right now, even if you were to buy a plot of land in Charlotte proper, you could not build a house on that property, period.
Yeah, I think so. Or the person that sold the lot next to me could build a huge duplex and apartment complex on it. There'd be no protection.
Okay, so it works both ways, huh?
Yeah. And so if you're in a wealthy neighborhood, you could protect yourself with an HOA. You'd have the lawyers and stuff to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. But the people in the lower income neighborhoods have no control. And they would be overrun. But single family housing is generational heritage. It's a way for people to pass down to their children. You build equity. You build, if you don't have that, you lose so much integrity of the neighborhoods, the family structure, the family unit. You're all packed in together in duplexes everywhere. There's no place for the children to play. I mean, it's just
right.
Thing.
Yeah, and it also goes to a little bit to personal freedom and trusting people, within restraints to do the right thing. Yeah, that's interesting. That sort of, it feels like a whole podcast in and of itself to understand what the full breadth of the 2040 plan is. And maybe we can get back to that in a little bit.
I would recommend you, if you want to know more, Ed Driggs would be wonderful to interview about that.
That's a great idea.
I'm just learning it.
I might just follow up with him about that. I want to talk a little bit about your campaign particularly. I went to your website. It's a phenomenal website, though. I think when I first met you, it wasn't I couldn't access it, but it was is full of a lot of information. And so, sometimes when you go to a candidate's website, you could get through it pretty quickly, but yours is, it's almost like a deep dive into issues, which is I really appreciated. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Have you planned to run for office for a while?
No, I just when this came, I've been a precinct chairman over here in this district. We lived over here. We've been over here 15 years. I grew up in South Charlotte. I grew up in Charlotte. When I was moved here when we were 4, and so I've been here the entire time. I did go to school in Raleigh for about 10 years and came back with my husband. And so I've seen a lot of changes in Charlotte. But I've always been political. I've always listened to what do you call it? News talk TV. I've listened to Rush Limbaugh for 30 years and I miss him so much. And I didn't become politically active until I gave my heart to the Lord Jesus Christ. And I said, okay, wait a minute, there's something so wrong here. And I started paying attention, and I just totally changed. And I knew the minute I got saved, I was going to homeschool my children. There's something wrong with the school systems. I can't do that. And so this stuff was happening 30 years ago. It wasn't the CRT you see today. As out. I mean, their hands are exposed. Everything's exposed now. This was back then. There was plenty of people warning us against us. James Dobson, way back then, warning us against the indoctrination of the children. And so I was not going to put them in there, even though the Charlotte school system at that time was still good. And I lived in an area that was a decent system like Matthews. I lived in Matthews, but I just wasn't going to do it. So I didn't. I homeschooled all of them all the way until the last 3 years of my youngest 2. I had to go to work when the economy collapsed in 2007, and my husband became ill. So I had to go to work, leaving the house. Now I've worked at home. We've had all these businesses at home, and we had paint business and dog breeding business and things like that, just to make it work. I was going to sacrifice everything. No one else was going to raise my children. And but me and my husband. So we sacrificed, but the Lord has blessed us tremendously through all that. I was over here, when Trump got involved. I thought, got a little bit more interested. Somebody's finally talking the way we do, even though I wasn't a Christian, of course, but he was very conservative leaning. And so I got more involved, became a precinct chair. And then through the whole 4 years, everything is just coming to light, so much happening. The persecution of the Christians now with us. Now they're going domestic terrorists on us. There's we have to do something. I can't keep sitting on the couch watching Tucker and buying pillows. I have to do something. So they called me the night before the filing and said, the Patriots, Mark Schalk of the Patriots said, they really want somebody to step in there and put your name down and then make Malcolm Graham spend some money. That's all you have to do. Just go down there and put your name down there. And I talked to my husband and I said, Doug, what do you think? And he goes, well, it is your passion, because I'm a political junkie. And I said, well, we got to pray over it, sleep on it. And I just couldn't sleep. I got up the next morning, made some phone calls. I decided at 10:30, jumped up, ran down there, had to come up with a check. Who has a check anymore? You got to have a check. Had to stop by 2 banks to get a check and filed. And then at that time, I just thought, I was going to do it. And then I said, there's no way I cannot do anything. What an opportunity. This is something I've always wanted to do, but never had the nerve. And it's like, oh my gosh, God just put me in this spot. And it's a spot that's like, it's like a 20-1 chance of me winning, because this is 20% Republican and 80% Democrat over here. And this incumbent has been in here for 20 years. And it's like the last guy who ran got 2,900 votes, and he really pushed it as a Republican. And the other guy got like 12,000. So it's a big difference there, but I don't care. I'm going to still try. I'm going to do my best. I've done my best. I've started from the beginning. I've been running ever since. I've been meeting with policemen. I've been going to community events. I'm looking into nonprofits and asking them how they're doing. Has the city reached out to you? The last guy I asked, the men's place, he had an article in the paper Friday. I called him up and said, I'm so impressed with your operation. I'd like to meet you. He said that not one city council member has come to see him, especially Malcolm Graham, the one that is in his district, has never come to see him. And his organization's been there since 2009, and it's reaching at-risk boys in this area. So I just decided I just can't not do anything. We can't, and government is local. I mean, we get so focused on the stuff at the top, we get nothing done. That's, we're focused on the national everything, and we don't pay attention to what's down here. This is an opportunity to do something in this city. Charlotte controls the entire state. It makes the state purple. If you looked at the last election when Ted Budd, everything was red for McCrory except that one little blue Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. We are a red state, but Charlotte is where all the Democrats live, and there's more people. So if we can flip the city council and start and push back on all this liberal stuff coming through.
Well, let me ask you this though,
Yeah.
because a number of things that you said were really interesting to me. One of which is, as you stated, you had some sort of switch in your life, and it sounds like it was a religious experience, conversion. You were born again, and that sort of began almost your stand against sort of things that were going on in the community. And in your case, it was your children. Tell me a little bit about that. So did you grow up in a Christian environment? How did you come to that change in your life? Because it sounds like it was in your 20s.
I was 25, 26. I was raised in Charlotte. I went to Providence United Methodist Church. Was in church every time the door was open with my parents. It was a liberal Methodist church. I knew there was a God, never heard the salvation message at all, but my parents had me there all the time. They felt that was important. And so I was very moral, for the most part. I mean, I wasn't perfect, but I didn't drink, didn't smoke, because of some family issues. I was never going to touch alcohol. And I never did drugs. I had a ball in high school. Everyone was drunk, and I just loved high school and junior high. Graduated from South Neck. And so when I finished college, I graduated from Meredith, and there was a point I felt like the world was ending, and that was back then in the 80s. Gosh, how come people can't see it now? And back in the 80s, when I first got saved, it was 1988. No, that's when we got married, 86. I've heard it said, and this is so true. I got saved, and all we talked about was the rapture. And all we did was think Jesus is coming back soon, so we're not going to do anything. I mean, and the church lost its position. Now, this started way back before me, but we stopped saying this is wrong, this is wrong. And we lost the moral high ground to say and to stop the onset of what was happening. But you could still see it was there. And I knew immediately. It was like night and day. I don't know. It's just, the Holy Spirit convicting you that this is the way it should be done. I didn't want children. I had been raised in a family where I was very angry. And I said, I don't want to be a mother because I don't want to be like that, my mother. I'm going to do the same thing. Well, I got saved, and I go, no, I know how to do it. And it just got infused in me. It was like, God, well, now I know how to do it. It was like, I didn't take any classes. It was just God. And so I knew I wasn't going to let anyone, it was my responsibility to educate my children, to if I was to stand before God and say, I did not, and this is nothing against working moms, because I'm working now, I have to, but if it is possible, if it is possible to stay home with them, make that sacrifice. It's made all the difference in the world. But I can stand before God and say, I did my best. I did what I felt like I needed to do. Is I raised my children for you. Now, whether they make their decisions, how the children turn out later is their responsibility. But I did what I knew I had to do.
And of course, in the 80s, so late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I guess you probably started homeschooling or mid to late 90s, I would imagine.
Mid-90s, yeah. And back then in the 80s, that's when Ralph Reed was coming through, and he's going to be here tomorrow at the Faith and Family Freedom thing. He was talking, we were involved in that particular time period when Pat Robertson was running for president. We became delegates at that time, and then we've really done nothing until recently, because it was like a lost cause almost, until Trump was like, oh my gosh, there might be a possibility, and like he's like a Cyrus coming in to push back. And I believe for the end time revival, even, push back against the evil so that we're available. The United States is city on the hill. Is we could share the gospel with the entire world when it's time, when things are bad, that we'll be ready for the end time harvest if we turn back from our troubles.
Let me ask you this, because back in the late 80s or mid 90s, homeschooling was not as, I mean, it was sort of looked at like a subversive act a little bit. Like we didn't have, nowadays, especially in a time of pandemic, homeschooling has exploded, and it's particularly exploded in the minority communities.
I'm so glad.
But back in the day, right, there, people just didn't know what to make of it. And so in a sense, you sort of, you faced this fight before where you were different than those around you, and yet you stood by your principles and fought the good fight. Does any of that, the lessons that you've learned through that particular time that God brought you through, of homeschooling your kids even when very few people were doing it, does that influence at all how you're going about your political career right now?
Yes. And I even found it over through COVID and having to stand up, and I was going to lose my job if I had to get vaccinated as well. Thank goodness it didn't come to that. Yeah. I'm going to have to stand up for some difficult things with the city council. They did not, I asked who made the decisions on the masking and such, and the city council, they said that they only made a decision on the city council itself and that building, that the Department of Health and Human Services made all the decisions for the state. And then there's the bathroom bill. They were involved in that back during the NCAA problem and stuff. I would have never voted for that. I would have had to say no. Carrie and James and I are very strong believers, and the three of us even stand together now. If we have some difficult situations that come up, that are going to come up, the three of us are going to say no. And if we have to disagree with the slate, we will, because we do have some people with different opinions and lifestyles on the slate, and that's fine. I love them all. They're wonderful people. But if there's something that we have to disagree on, we will. We've already talked about it. I think I'm kind of, I obey all the laws, and I'm very conscientious, and I do my best at my job and stuff. And then I think about, I really am kind of rebellious. I mean, my mother was upset when I homeschooled, and there was a good network back then, believe it or not. It's better now. There were some stores and everything, and we can figure things out. Moms are so creative when it's our children. It's our children, and we love them the most, and we know what they need. We know their learning styles. We know, what kind of stuff would interest them. We find the curriculum in need, and the better we get, we know what curriculum fits this child and what fits this child. And, it gets better and better and easier and easier. And then I had 2 children at home, and my mother just about flipped. So, and I was thinking when this happened, and I talked to the kids, I said, well, y'all, we wouldn't have had any problem with this. We were home. You wouldn't have had to stay home and look at a computer all day. We would have just gone outside and played like we always do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna do that.
Definitely. A lot of parents had their eyes opened during this time of pandemic when the kids came home. And of course, it's no secret. The CMS rollout wasn't that smooth. But let's talk a little bit about your particular issues, because you talked about a mother knowing her children and sort of individualized modification of education, because there's not a one size fits all for your children, and there's not one size fits all for individual citizens of a city either. And it sounds like you're one of these people who is doing what not a lot of politicians do. You're just being that mother, going around asking people, okay, how do you do this? How do you do that? What do you need? Tell me a little bit about sort of your key issues that are most important to you if you were to be elected to city council.
Um, I've had to, look at all the issues, and the more you find, the more you find. And we're trying to, they want us all to focus on one particular thing to be an expert in. And I'm not an expert in anything except a lot of things. I know a little bit about everything, but not a whole lot about one thing. So I'm trying to figure out one thing. My biggest interest right now is the 2040 plan and crime. And it just so those are the 2 things I'm working on. I'm going to go on a ride along with the police. We're trying to get the Fraternal Order of Police to endorse all of us. But I have met with 2 lieutenant. I'm meeting with policemen and asking, okay, what works for crime? We hear gun control. I said this at the meeting. And so I'm getting all kinds of different ideas. Because there's these children are killing each other. And why? I think we all know why. The breakdown of the family. It's difficult for you to say kind of things like that. In my area, you have to be very politically correct, because they think you don't know what you're talking about. You're a white lady coming in the black neighborhoods and saying this. So I have to be very diplomatic about it. But there's still, it's a hard issue. These children have no purpose. They have no idea of God. There's no family structure. So the crime is coming from the lack of God, the lack of family. Their hearts are calloused. They don't have empathy because they've been abused so much as a child. A child loses that when they're abused so much in the family situations in these very poor neighborhoods or very poor situations.
So if that's the situation that we're looking at, what can we do? Because what can you do on the city council to address that? Is that heart issues are harder to deal with than something that you could throw money at.
Right. And heart issues are hard. Only God can do that. And so I have been looking into the financial partners, they call them, as to what they're giving the money toward. That's the kind of thing, is to reach these neighborhoods or reach these areas, and the nonprofits that are doing these kind of things, and looking at each one of them and saying, okay, what does this one involve? Are these pet projects of the Democrats that are on there now that are really doing no good? There's one on there called Alternative to Violence. I've talked to several policemen. They say it doesn't work. I read articles about it, and everybody that worked on it quit. That's where it's a program, and it started somewhere else, and this is like a branch of it. They put the people that were raised in the neighborhood the same neighborhood, say Beatty's Ford, who've been drug dealers and went to jail, and they're reformed and they're fine now, and they're not doing what they used to do. They come back in to the neighborhood, and they have to get 14 boys signed up, and they mentor them and try to keep them off the streets. And they have to have 14 people no matter what. They've only had like 13. They haven't been meeting their things. But it's not working because it's kind of like, it's just kind of backfiring on them. The people that it's kind of like you're going back into where you were doing
so
the crime.
it's hurting the mentors.
The mentors, yeah, the mentors aren't holding up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So basically, the general idea is that as a city council member, you have some say over the budget or the movement of funds, and so if we get different people in there, perhaps those funds flow to hopefully more effective means for. So it's not just a police thing. It's also flowing funds to organizations that are more effective.
Yeah, that. And then if you say the 2040 plan, if it decimates their neighborhoods even more, it's going to be worse for them. So we don't have, I think education is huge, but the city council has nothing to do with education. I had considered running for the school board, but probably would have never had the nerve. But this is where God put me. So I'm going to say, okay, what can I do in this position? And I'm going to figure it out.
And I guess probably with city council, and I know on your website it mentions a lot, and I think it's the first time I've seen it for a city council position on a website. In trades, emphasizing trade jobs and education, and that's something that I guess the council can do, even that it doesn't affect the CMS budget per se, but it still is sort of an educational component that can help communities.
They actually do give some money towards that kind of thing. And there's so many organizations. Have you ever heard of ROC? I think that's a Goodwill organization. I'm not sure, but there's two of them that are positioned directly across from two of the high schools in Charlotte, and they're trade schools, and it's nonprofit, and they will get the students from the schools. One is West Mecklenburg, and one is Piedmont something, and they're over here somewhere, and they will get the students, and they will come over to the school, and they will take a class on trades and IT, all kinds of stuff. It's ROC. You should look into it. And that's a wonderful thing. Get the kids while they're in school. Remember, we used to have shop when I was young, and we had auto mechanics, and they would teach that kind of thing when I was younger. But they took that out of the school. So if this particular thing is taking the kids at that age, at that impressionable age, and saying, you can do this. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go in debt to learn how to do nothing. So I'm really pleased that I found that out. There's just so much really good stuff going on. So if this, we can find more of those. And we're finding that also, I found also that the affordable housing budget, they're putting a disproportionate amount of money in affordable housing and not in the business development. We really need to get more money in the business development so that more business will come in, so that people will have jobs to be able to afford the houses they live in now and not get pushed out by some six-figure person working downtown who wants to put this $800,000 triplex there. So if we can, you can't sustain what the money they're putting against them into housing is not sustainable right now. They need to put more in business development, and so that's another thing the city can do.
So the 2040 plan, that is available publicly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess you just Google 2040 plan Charlotte and you'll
You
probably
go to
find
city,
it.
Charlotte, the city government, Charlotte city government website, and it's on there. Everything's on there. I don't know if the UDO is on there. Unified Development Ordinance, that's what it is.
Nice. I knew it was going to come get into this interview. Well, Mary, thank you so much. We're bumping up against time here, but
Okay.
and maybe at some point we can have you back on the show when as you get closer to the date. But I want to thank you for joining the podcast. I learned a lot. If people want more information or would like to volunteer for your campaign, or most importantly, make donations, they should go to maryforcitycouncil.com. Is that right? Mary
That's
for
right.
City Council. And that's a four, the number four. So Mary number four citycouncil.com. And I'll post that information in the details of the summary details of this video. And you can also subscribe to the By Many or By Few channel if you're interested in keeping up with North and South Carolina politics. And
Have you showed them, have you told them the importance of this election and how this a window of opportunity to flip the city?
we have touched on that a
Okay.
bit. And it's an opportunity coming up to take the city in a different direction.
Well,
There's a lot
the
of
people
things.
don't realize this election is happening, and if we can get the base out to get enough votes to overrule the amount of Democrats there are, that's the key to this. And it's never happened before. So
Correct.
so we can get all the help we can get, all the votes we can get, everyone involved would be wonderful.
Absolutely. And so, yeah. And so if you're interested at all, definitely reach out to Mary. She's very accessible. You can find all her contact information on her website. And also she mentioned in passing the Slate, which is a group of conservative folks who are running for city council. There's a complete group of 4 who are running at large, and there's almost complete set running for the districts, not quite complete, but the idea is if all of them can win their races, the city council makeup could be dramatically different. And the website for that is Summer is Coming. Is that right? Summer is Coming, CLT.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So you can visit that as well to see the bigger picture. This has been a By Many or By Few podcast. And until next time, stand up for what's right, even if you stand alone. Thank you.
Thank you.